Hey there, magical experimenters. Taylor Ellwood here, and welcome to the latest show. And you know the drill. If you're new to this channel, go ahead and click subscribe, and then click on the notification bell. And if you've been here before, like and comment. So today's topic is about knowing, not knowing, and power. And you might be like, well, why'd you come with that topic, Taylor? Well, one, I was reading this book today called Creating by Robert Fritz. And I highly recommend it. And if you get a chance, check it out. And it made me think about a situation that happened this week, a situation that I basically caused. And I'm not going to get into the situation too much. It's not really anyone's business, but I want to talk. But what I want to talk about is I want to talk about a very specific aspect of that situation that stands out to me. So basically, in here in this book, Robert Fritz talks about tension and resolution, and he uses this example of 7 glasses of water. And he's at this workshop where basically he fills up a glass of water, doesn't explain why. People ask, people don't necessarily notice. Then he fills up another one, and eventually people start asking, and he doesn't answer. At the end of the workshop, he finally sits down and explains to him that what he's doing is creating this experience of tension resolution. And what he's doing is that by pouring the water into these glasses at random times, he's upping the tension. People don't know why he's doing what he's doing. And they start coming up with explanations and reasons and speculations. Now, one of my sayings is, challenge what you know by discovering what you don't know. And I live up to that saying a lot, I would say. But sometimes, like anybody else, I don't. Sometimes I get caught up in what I think I know about a situation or a person or whatever. And this is human nature, okay? Like this is nothing unusual, but it's interesting to reflect upon it because of what it teaches you about yourself when you have these realizations. Now I'm going to explain this a bit further, but I want to read something first from this book. He's asking this one person why they put a flower in it, and the person says in the glass of water, and the person says, I have had an intolerance for not knowing what is going on, and when I don't know, I try to do something to control the situation. Also, I lie to myself about why I'm doing what I'm doing, or if I'm not lying, I'm not always aware of the real reason I do some things. And then Robert Fritz goes on to say, many people speculate when something is unknown to them. The function of speculation is not to simply satisfy curiosity, but to give them a sense of security and continuity. Okay, we're going to come back and I'm going to read more about that later, but I want to talk about the situation. So I was reading this and I had this realization about this situation in my life where basically I didn't know how to address a situation. And what I ended up doing is I ended up falling back on what I knew. I was afraid to not know. I was afraid to challenge what I knew. And really, I didn't know how to resolve the tension in a way that made sense. That I got focused more on trying to control the situation and have a sense of power in it. Not like in an intentional way. Like I was trying to resolve something, right? But it didn't work. Nothing I did worked. And the reason why is because I got so caught up in what I knew. I let it become a blinder for me that I didn't accept what I didn't know, and I didn't just relax into that and let everything go. I speculated. I tried to come up with the best possible answer. And all I really ended up doing was making the situation more tense. And it's an illustrative lesson how even someone like myself who says challenge what you know by discovering what you can learn, how sometimes you can still get caught up in what you know, and how you can let that limit you and blind you. And this is really important in magical work, but it's also important in life. This is why I'm sharing this. Because a lot of times when we get caught up in what we know, we actually blind ourselves to the reality of the situation. We get caught up in our speculations and our assumptions and our presumptions and all these other things, and we let those guide and dictate us. And sometimes, in all fairness, they work. I'm not going to say they don't ever not work, but a lot of the time they don't serve us. Not really. They serve us in the short run. They give us maybe a sense of security or safety or comfort, but they don't allow us to fully recognize how we might actually be setting ourselves up for a fall. Well, as you guys know, I'm good at setting myself up for a fall, or at least maybe I'm just more honest about it than most people. I actually had a conversation today with someone, a friend. Well, yeah, a friend. And she was talking about the fact that she's like, "You're one of the most aware people I know." And I got a little bitter about it because I haven't had good associations with that word aware for a year. And I brought it up, and she said to me, "Well, Taylor, here's the thing. You recognize when you're a bull in a china shop sometimes, and you recognize that you've broken the china, and you recognize that you've done things, and you at least acknowledge that." She's like, there are other people who are bulls in the china shop who don't even acknowledge what they've done, who don't even recognize when they did something wrong or they messed something up, and they just go on their way, and they don't acknowledge the hurt or whatever else. And I thought about that, and I'm like, that's true. I mean, at least I can say that, if I've done something dumb, I'm generally aware of it after the fact, and I do acknowledge it. I mean, that's something, at least. If you can do that, actually, you have taken a serious step forward in your life, really. When you can acknowledge that what you've done has had an impact on somebody, on yourself as well, but like it has had an impact in a way that like you're not just like blind to it. You do see it. I'm not saying it makes your life any easier. If anything, in some ways it makes your life harder because you are aware of it. And I think that one of the challenges that I've had, and I've really been realizing this, is I've had this challenge around, I've been too hard on myself, really, for a long time. And this year has just kind of amplified it. And now I'm like, no, I'm not going to do that anymore. Had another realization today. I was reading the Courage to Live, okay, which is the sequel to The Courage to Be Disliked. And the guy makes the point that now defines your past. Like, people think past defines your present, but now defines your past. And he was making the point that, people cherry pick their past. They cherry pick what they want to focus on and use that as a way to define themselves. But really, it's their choice to be present in the moment that defines who they are and where they are. This is one of the reasons why I like to read a lot of different books. And inevitably what I find is that when I do a reading date like this, like I read for a couple hours, I start drawing connections between these different books, and I have these realizations. And then I have these profound breakthroughs in my magical practice as a result. But also in other areas of my life, if I'm really lucky. And I want to have it in those other areas of life, especially because sometimes that helps me become a better person for the people in my life and for me. And really, I would say that to any of you. That's ultimately the goal. Like, we want to try and be the best possible person we can be. But sometimes, in the effort to being the best possible person we can be, we make some serious missteps as well. We don't mean to. I mean, But sometimes you get caught up in thinking like, well, I don't know, so I'm going to try and know something, because knowing gives us a sense of power. The problem is do we really even know it? Now I'm going to read a little bit more of Robert Fritz to you. So Robert Fritz says, we were talking about speculation earlier. This speculation can obscure the true tension in any situation. Does the tension go away? No. Does the impression of tension go away? Too often, yes. In the creative process, tension is the engine that generates energy for action. But when people are unfamiliar with tension as a force, they attempt to resolve it prematurely and synthetically. Why do they do that? For some, the unknown seems to lead to control, power, and authority issues. Not knowing gives them the impression that they are not in control of their own destinies. They view anyone who seems to know more than they do as at a distinct advantage. They become focused on who is in the know, which to them translates into be careful of the person with the power. Consequently, they may react to those who seem to know. They may react adversely to those who seem to know more. There are others who form their sense of identity by what they know, how much they know, or what is relevant to know. Well, where do we take that? Well, here's where I take it. When I look at myself in a situation where I don't know, sometimes I'm comfortable with not knowing. Like this last week at my job, I've been training, getting trained on this new job that I'm doing. I don't know anything. I'm totally comfortable with that. I'm learning, but I still don't know. And sometimes when I'll do like magical work, for example, same thing, or consulting with somebody, I don't know, and I'm comfortable with that. And I'll ask lots of questions. Hey, Brett. Yeah, it has been a long time. So the thing is though, sometimes we're in the space of not knowing, right? And it's an uncomfortable space because there's tension there and we want to resolve it. And why we want to resolve it is because in that experience of not knowing, we feel challenged. Well, I don't know. And there's this tension here and I've got to somehow resolve it and fix it and somehow make it right. But here's one of the hardest lessons you can learn. And I learned it this week again. I mean, I've learned it sometimes, but sometimes you have to learn it again. I'm one of those people. So one of the hardest lessons you can learn is that what you know doesn't automatically provide you a solution. And a lot of times what you know is speculation. You don't really know. You think you know, and you're making a presumption at that point. And sometimes that act of not knowing and just admitting that you don't know can actually be a very vulnerable act, but it can be one of the most powerful things you do. Because in accepting that you do not know, you're also opening yourself up to the possibility that you can discover and learn. And how humble that can be. It can be one of the most humbling experiences, and it can be one of the most grounding experiences of your life. So for me, this week has kind of been a lesson in that. And this situation come up. Primarily, it was pretty much on me. And again, I'm not going to go into the details or anything. But what I'm going to go into here is there was tension there. And what I focused on was trying to find a solution to that tension. It's like, if I do X, if I do Y, if I do Z, this is going to somehow fix the situation. And it didn't. It didn't fix the situation at all. What it did do is what it ended up doing is it really illustrated for me that just because I thought I knew something, I didn't. And it actually made things harder than they needed to be. Now, I'll be the first person to admit that I am not going back to the comment that my one friend made today, where she's like, you're so aware and everything. And then, we talked about the bull in the china shop. Well, yeah, sometimes I'm very aware, but that awareness is gained by the fact that I have been a bull in a china shop. Okay. And I mean, I guess at a certain point, you just kind of have to laugh about it. I'm laughing about it at this point. I'm just kind of operating from a place of forgiveness toward myself for it. And part of that's because, like I said, I had this realization of like, now defines your past. Well, I'm tired of letting the past trauma of this last year define me. So now I'm choosing to define it from a place of, well, right now I'm in a brand spanking new home. I'm doing work for the most part that I want to be doing. And even the work that I'm doing just to maintain a living is actually pretty interesting. And I'm starting my life over. And there's opportunities here. So I can look at my past and I can either say, well, boo-hoo, I got divorced. I went through all this other stuff. Or I can say, yeah, here I am in my present now. And my past has brought me to this point. and it's given me a new opportunities, and I can be grateful for that. I'm going to try that for the next week, and I'll let you guys know how that goes, because I think it'll be a good experiment for me. It's kind of interesting, like, if you expose yourself to multiple perspectives, it opens your mind. This is why I think it's so important to do something like what I do, which is where I do a reading date. Like, I think I read like a chapter out of like about 7 or 8 different books today. And it was just so wonderful because each book ended up feeding into the other in some form or manner. And they weren't all necessarily like, it wasn't like specific relationships. Sometimes it was just tangential. But that's the beautiful thing. Like, when we expose ourselves to multiple perspectives, it pushes us out of our own perspective. It kicks us out of what we know, and it causes us to challenge that in order to discover what we don't know. And in this case, part of me was having this very real realization of, well, I think I know. I thought I knew something, but I really didn't. And it was like, it just clicked into place, and it was like, aha, I don't know. And it was really profound. Like, it was just a sense of relief in a way, like, okay, I don't know. And yes, it was a sense of vulnerability. I mean, I'm really feeling that right now. Like, it's kind of like this sense of vulnerability of, wow, I really don't know. And as a result, the tension is there, but it's not as bad as it was. Because in that act of not knowing, I've actually provided myself a resolution of sorts. Not a resolution for the tension altogether, but an acceptance that I don't know. And if I don't know, I can be okay with that and actually be open to the situation unfolding without having to try and control it. And it wasn't that I was like trying to control it from like a place of like, oh, I have to be in control. It was more like I was trying to control the situation from a place of just like fear of loss and like fear of other things, and in a very real sense, it kind of revealed how insecure I can be sometimes, which is okay. I mean, we all have that. But what an act of confidence it can actually be when you embrace what you don't know and you step into the power of that not knowing and allow it to transform your experience, because suddenly you're open to everything that's going on and you're observing. You're not speculating. Speculation is when you try to use what you know to control a situation. And again, some people do this intentionally. A lot of people don't. It wasn't like I was intentionally trying to control the situation. It's just that I was trying to resolve it. But tension can't always be resolved when you want it to be. And the most powerful admission you can have is recognizing that you can actually be open to the experience in a very vulnerable way. And Rachel asked, do you think the admittance of not knowing allows one to flow? I do. I really do. I do think that when you can admit that you don't know, it does actually allow you to flow, because suddenly you're like, oh, here I was blocking myself with what I thought I knew, right? I'm blocking it. But when I let it go and I'm just like, I don't know, it actually allows you to flow into that not knowing. And it helps you recognize and just release the tension. And again, it doesn't necessarily resolve all the tension, but you go into this place of observation. And if you're really smart about it, and say this is someone who's made the mistake of not being so smart about it, so learn from my mistakes, young Padawans. If you're really smart about it, you accept that you don't know, and you let go of that need to control, and you just open yourself to the experience so that you can enter it from a place of just awareness and perspective. It teaches you how to grow in that place of not knowing. It's something I'm going to be trying a bit more in certain areas of my life. I've got it down pat when it comes to magical work and business stuff. I'm very good at not knowing when it comes to that stuff. No problem with it. In other aspects of my life, sometimes I could use a refresher course, and I'm realizing that right now, and it's not a bad thing, you know. It's actually a very humbling and healthy and good thing to realize this and be like, well, I don't know, and maybe I don't need to know. Maybe I can just let go and just let things organically develop from there. Now, I'll admit, in my particular case, I'm also recognizing like again, just how much other things going on in my life has contributed to this. And how in a very real way, a lot of what I'm starting to really relax and settle into is being uncertain from a place of feeling safe in that uncertainty. Whereas before I have not felt safe. I mean, I don't know, when you reinvent your life from scratch and you've lost so much in that process, it can be a very challenging and scary thing to be secure in that, because it's like, oh, how do I be secure in my place of not knowing when everything around me is falling apart? It's not easy. And I'm realizing that, and I'm giving myself some gentleness here in regards to this, because I realize, like, well, you're finally getting into a place where things aren't falling apart. You're putting them back together again for the most part, and doing a pretty good job. But even when you put it back together, you still don't know. There's going to be blind spots. So maybe just accepting that can actually help you navigate those currents a bit better. And I think the key to power, and this is really interesting because this month is the month I'm working with Neptune. So really, I realize this is a lesson from Neptune. Like, it's like Neptune gently slapping me in the face and saying, like, dude, come on, you know this stuff. You should know this stuff. How many times have I taught you? You know, Neptune, I do know, but sometimes I've got a thick skull. I can be a little dense. Uh, but the thing is, it's like, it's just like you kind of have to laugh at a certain point about the whole thing, and that's what I'm doing right now, because I just think it's kind of funny at this point. But it's a lesson. Like, okay, you don't know what you don't know, and when you can accept that, then you can start to become more comfortable with it. So those are my thoughts for you guys tonight. It's just kind of an impromptu video prompted by the fact that I was reading these different books and thinking about these things, but also just reflecting on the experiences, and just some things clicked into place. And I'm like, oh, that's the lesson that's going on here, huh? I am familiar with technomancy, Brett. I'm actually editing a book right now on that topic for a friend, and I've actually written about some of it as well in some of my books. So, and I have a future book planned on some topics, and I actually a podcast. My first new podcast episode coming out later this week is going to be all about technomancy. I'm interviewing someone who did work with AI and magic, so very familiar. So again, the lesson for today, the lesson from Neptune, the lesson that I'm kind of like finally clicking into place for me, is let go of your need to be in control. Let go of your need to know. And just relax into that state of unknowing. You don't know all the answers, and you can't always resolve the tension when you want to. And sometimes you just make that tension, when in your efforts to try and solve something, you just stoke that tension higher. And if you're fortunate, you learn the lesson in time so that you can actually carry it forward in a way that makes things healthier for you in the end. But again, that's part of the human condition, right? And as you guys know, on this channel, I'm very real with you guys about it. I'm very transparent about things for precisely this reason. Because most of the people out there practicing magic will not be this transparent. That was what the person was saying to me today. She's like, you share so much, like in a way that most people don't. She's like, you've got balls for doing that. And I'm like, well, thanks. You know, but it really comes right down to the fact that, I mean, I made a commitment when I was 18 that I was never going to hide what I practiced and what I believed ever again, because the cost of doing that had just illustrated to me that when you hide, it ultimately gives other people power in not good ways. Now that's a different topic, and we'll talk about that some other time. But it really does. It really kind of taps into why I am so transparent about things and why I talk about some of the things I talk about, because I would rather you guys learn from my mistakes and hopefully not make them, and realize that, like, I mean, someone who practices magic does not, they don't get a get out of jail free card. Like, they're not always, they're not always going to have the answer. They're not always going to have the solution. And that's okay. None of us do. This is part of the human condition. And when we can accept that and learn from it, it actually empowers us to be better people. And if we're lucky, well, not lucky, nah. If we know what we're doing, we become better magicians as well. All right, that's it for tonight. Thanks for watching, guys, and have a great one.